Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. In cities like Nashville, people run to feel safe, to clear their minds, to feel free. But on one October evening, freedom turned fatal, and what started as a jog ended as a crime scene, so silent, yet so loud in what it revealed about fear, about control, and about how quickly a stranger can shatter everything. October 14th, 2024 was a Monday. Clear skies, 68 degrees, light wind. Just another late afternoon on Mill Creek Greenway, one of Nashville's most commonly used trails. It wasn't isolated. In fact, it cut through a residential corridor in Antioch, bordered by apartment complexes, office parks, and a public library. Runners, cyclists, and dog walkers passed through daily. It wasn't the kind of place anyone expected to die. At approximately 5:32 p.m., Metro Nashville Emergency Communications received a 911 call from a passing cyclist. The caller's voice was clipped, shaky, as if trying to push the words out faster than his brain could process them. "There's a woman down on the trail. I heard yelling, then shots. 3, maybe 4. I think she's been shot. She's not moving." Responding officers from MNPD's South Precinct arrived on scene within 8 minutes. The first responding patrol secured the site near the Edmondson Pike overpass. The victim was found lying face down in a patch of grass just off the paved trail, less than 4 feet from the path's edge. Her body showed multiple gunshot wounds to the upper torso. EMS declared her deceased at 5:50 p.m. There was no wallet or identification on the body. Officers recovered a smartphone approximately 6 feet away, screen still active, displaying a running app. Total distance logged, 1.47 miles. Pulse data from her smartwatch revealed an abrupt spike in heart rate, followed by a flatline. Investigators noted a sudden deceleration pattern in her pace, consistent with someone stopping, turning, or being physically intercepted. Near the body were 3 9mm shell casings, spaced unevenly, suggesting rapid fire from close range. No projectiles were recovered at the scene initially. A 4th casing was found approximately 2 feet from the rest, lodged between the dirt path and a root cluster. The position of the victim's body suggested she was attempting to retreat or rotate defensively before collapsing. There were signs of brief physical struggle, disrupted gravel, drag patterns from a running shoe, and a faint smudge resembling a palm print on her upper shoulder blade. No clear footprints. Forensic technicians documented everything under strict chain of custody. The techs photographed the scene, took soil samples, and flagged all potential trace evidence. The victim's clothing, running tights, performance tank top, was torn in one location on the left side, suggesting contact. Her earbuds were still in. One had fallen from her ear and was found under a bush, stained faintly with blood. No defensive wounds were visible on her hands, but her fingernails had traces of skin tissue. A full autopsy would confirm whether it belonged to the assailant. The area had no installed security cameras. However, a public bus stop approximately 80 yards from the trail entrance had a working transit cam. Officers pulled 45 minutes of footage. Around 5:15 p.m., a silver BMW sedan was observed parking off trail at an angle. A male individual exited, walked toward the wooded trailhead, and disappeared from view. He returned 20 minutes later, alone, walking with a limp, his shirt appearing damp at the lower hem. That detail was flagged immediately. The footage was grainy, and the license plate was partially obscured by sunlight flare. Still, the make and partial plate were enough to begin narrowing the field. Detectives pushed the image through state DMV records cross-referenced with auto insurance logs for silver BMWs registered in Davidson and Williamson counties. The crime scene itself offered little else in the way of direct answers. No weapon was found, no written note, no graffiti, no signatures. This wasn't personal, at least not obviously. It looked opportunistic, precise, quick. Identification came within hours. Using fingerprints lifted from the victim's left index finger, the MNPD crime lab matched the print to Alyssa Lokits, a 34-year-old cybersecurity analyst residing in downtown Nashville. Her last known login activity at her workplace server had ended at 4:41 p.m. She'd sent a Slack message to her colleague. Logging off, going for a run. It was her routine. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, same trail, same time. The fact that someone had known her routine or crossed paths with it would become the central question in the days to come. The body was transported to the Davidson County Medical Examiner's office by 7 o'clock p.m. An initial field report confirmed the presence of 3 entrance wounds, one center mass to the chest, one to the upper abdomen, and a final shot just below the right clavicle. All at close range. No exit wounds. Bullet trajectories were downward angled, consistent with a shooter of average height standing over a collapsed target. Investigators did not find any signs of sexual assault at the scene, though a swab kit and forensic examination were ordered out of protocol. One detective noted faint fingernail marks along the victim's triceps, non-lethal, possibly defensive. Back at Precinct HQ, lead detective Michelle Reyes reviewed the trail camera footage and requested canvassing of nearby apartment complexes and parking lots. They needed dashcam captures, witness testimony, anything that could provide context or motive. By 10 o'clock p.m., they had a working timeline. 4:50 p.m., Alyssa leaves her apartment, phone location data confirms movement toward the Greenway. 5:11 p.m., she begins her run. Log time starts on her app. 5:29 p.m., her pace spikes, heart rate elevates. 5:32 p.m., heart rate flatlines. 5:33 p.m., 911 call received. It was tight. No gap. No window for delay. Whatever happened, happened fast. Detective Reyes reviewed the biometric data again and again. There was something too clean about it. No chase sequence, no prolonged acceleration. Just contact, spike, death. She marked it in her notes. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that's the problem. As night fell over Nashville, 2 things were clear. The victim had no known enemies, and whoever pulled that trigger had either followed her or waited. The forensic ID was confirmed before midnight. Alyssa Lokits, 34 years old, resident of downtown Nashville. Fingerprint match came from a prior background check filed during her employment onboarding in 2021. She had no criminal record, no restraining orders, no known mental health flags. As of October 2024, she worked full-time as a cybersecurity analyst for a mid-sized data compliance firm contracted by several healthcare clients. Investigators obtained a search warrant for her apartment by 6 o'clock a.m. the following morning. Entry was made with body cam documentation. No signs of forced entry, no disarray. The refrigerator contained prepped meals labeled by day. A notepad by the door read, "Run, 5 o'clock p.m." Detective Reyes and tech analyst George Pell conducted the initial apartment sweep. A laptop was located on the kitchen counter, closed but active. Reyes noted the last search activity, Weather Nashville, October 14th. Her email inbox showed nothing unusual. No threats, no flagged messages. She had one package scheduled for delivery on October 15th. Investigators pulled cell tower records for Alyssa's number. Between 4:42 and 5:12 p.m., her phone pinged consistently along Edmondson Pike, ending near the trail entrance. GPS logs were extracted with consent from her service provider and matched with biometric data from her smartwatch. Her final steps were recorded. The pace steadied at 6:03 per mile until 5:29:44 p.m., then a sudden stop. A 13-second gap, then a sharp elevation in heart rate, peaking at 184 BPM. 9 seconds later, the signal flatlined. Autopsy results were returned by the medical examiner within 48 hours. Cause of death, 3 9mm gunshot wounds to the chest and upper torso, fired at close range. Manner of death, homicide, no signs of sexual assault, no defensive wounds, no ligature marks. There were minor bruises, consistent with a brief physical altercation, non-lethal. Time of death was confirmed as 5:32 p.m. plus 1 minute. Toxicology screen was clean. No alcohol, no controlled substances. She had no tattoos, no surgical implants, no distinguishing scars. Her fingernails contained trace DNA. Lab analysis estimated male contributor, not consistent with known contacts in her personal life. Reyes made contact with Alyssa's mother in Bowling Green, Kentucky. The family had last seen her 2 weeks earlier for a cousin's wedding. There were no recent family disputes, no estrangement. Alyssa had no current partner. Her last relationship ended 6 months prior, described by friends as amicable. No police reports were associated with that individual. The victim's employer confirmed her schedule. She clocked out early at 4:41 p.m. on October 14th. Co-workers reported nothing abnormal. One colleague remembered her saying, "I need the trail today. It's been a long Monday." The team began compiling a daily routine profile. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, run at Mill Creek. Evenings typically spent at home. No gym membership, no dating apps found on her devices, limited social media presence. LinkedIn profile last updated August 2024. The question was not how Alyssa lived. That was documented with precision. The question was why someone ended it. Reyes requested additional surveillance pulls from public and private cameras near the Edmondson Pike entrance. One apartment complex had a partially functional gate camera. At 5:10 p.m., it captured a silver BMW parked illegally outside the perimeter. The timestamp aligned with Alyssa's entry time to the Greenway. A man exited the vehicle wearing a dark hoodie and light jeans. No facial recognition match available, but partial license plate digits were visible, 6 and 4. DMV records narrowed down 5 potential matches in the greater Nashville area. Reyes flagged one, a 2012 BMW 3 Series registered to a male in Brentwood. Records showed a previous weapons charge, dismissed due to procedural error. Still, Reyes didn't jump. No suspect had been placed at the scene directly. No weapon recovered. Surveillance showed only movement, not motive, but a pattern was forming. While the tech team worked the plate, another angle emerged from Alyssa's phone metadata. Her workout app included a safety feature, periodic GPS beaconing to a trusted contact. That contact was an old friend from grad school based in Atlanta. When detectives reached out, the friend hadn't noticed anything unusual but mentioned Alyssa had messaged once about a man on the trail who creeped her out. That message dated back 6 weeks. It was never followed up. Investigators reviewed the text. There was no name, no photo, no clear incident, just, hey, if I go missing on Mill Creek, it's the guy with the creepy stare and the black cap. It wasn't specific. But in homicide work, throwaway lines often matter more in hindsight than in real time. Reyes recorded the sentence in her case journal, not because it identified the killer, but because it changed the stakes. This wasn't just a jog that went wrong. There had been fear, long before there was blood. October 15th, 2024. Less than 24 hours after Alyssa Lokits was shot and killed on Mill Creek Greenway, the investigation shifted toward a targeted vehicle. The partial license plate retrieved from surveillance footage, 6N4, matched 5 possible registrations in the Tennessee DMV system. One of those belonged to a 2012 BMW 3 Series registered to a man living in Brentwood, roughly 20 minutes south of the crime scene. The car was silver, matching the color seen in the transit cam footage. Detectives Reyes and Pell reviewed the vehicle's DMV photo and compared it to the time-stamped frame from 5:10 p.m. There was a visual consistency in model, wheel type, and bumper detailing. Before proceeding with contact, the team obtained judicial authorization for both location data retrieval and a visual inspection of the vehicle. A patrol unit was sent to the listed address early that afternoon. The BMW was found parked in the driveway. No visible damage, no sign of tampering. However, the vehicle was still warm. A second car, a Toyota sedan, was also on the property, registered to the same household. CSI processed the BMW on site under warrant. Trace swabs were collected from the door handles, steering wheel, gear shift, and passenger side floor mat. A presumptive field test on the passenger side carpeting revealed a weak positive for blood protein. Samples were sealed and logged. Inside the trunk, officers recovered 2 items that raised concern. First, a dark hoodie, slightly damp, with red discoloration around the cuffs. Second, a pair of Nike running shoes, size 10.5, stored in a plastic grocery bag, mud-caked at the soles. Photographic comparison showed the tread pattern closely resembled the unidentified prints found at the Greenway. Back at the lab, latent fingerprint lifts from the driver's side door matched the registered owner. Meanwhile, the DNA swab taken from Alyssa's fingernails was undergoing fast-track processing. Analysts had already confirmed male DNA non-household contributor. The match had not yet been established, but now there was a viable comparison. Detectives didn't make an arrest that day, but the net was tightening. They tracked phone records associated with the BMW's owner. On October 14th, from 5 o'clock to 5:40 p.m., the user's device had been pinging between Edmondson Pike and Bell Road, overlapping directly with Alyssa's GPS data. Additionally, the phone showed a 17-minute blackout. No outgoing calls, no text activity, no data use. It restarted service at 5:42 p.m. with a location update from I-24 heading southbound. According to cell tower triangulation, that vehicle left the Greenway just minutes after Alyssa's smartwatch flatlined. Investigators flagged that gap. A break in digital activity in 2024 isn't common. People don't go dark without intention. While the forensic team pushed forward with lab processing, Reyes ordered a digital canvas of surrounding businesses near the Greenway. A Shell station camera, positioned diagonally from the lot where the BMW had been parked, captured partial movement at 5:48 p.m. A male subject in a dark hoodie entered the store, stayed under a minute, and exited with a bottle of water. He paid cash. No visible injuries. Still, the timestamp added another puzzle piece. He had left the trail and made no attempt to conceal his movements. That confidence, or carelessness, stood out. Back at precinct headquarters, analysts cross-referenced facial features from the gas station footage with DMV license data from the BMW's owner. No direct match could be confirmed due to image resolution, but relative height, build, and jawline profile were consistent. On October 16th, the DNA results came back. The male DNA found under Alyssa Lokits' fingernails matched the registered owner of the BMW. That was the first direct forensic link placing a known individual in physical contact with the victim. Still, no weapon had been recovered, no confession, no witness saw the exact shooting. In Tennessee, that meant probable cause, but not a guaranteed conviction. Reyes briefed her team on the next steps. The data lines up too well, and when everything looks perfect, it usually isn't. She wasn't questioning the science. She was questioning the silence, the lack of any recorded struggle, no call from the suspect's phone, no disposal effort. This wasn't the work of someone panicking. It was the work of someone rehearsed. While the legal team began drafting an arrest warrant, the case was sent to behavioral analysis for offender profiling. Analysts noted the location, method, and timing as indicative of predatory targeting, not random, not impulsive. The profile noted that the killer had either planned the attack or at minimum carried out an opportunistic assault with calculated steps for evasion. In either case, the victim was selected, not simply encountered. At the same time, media pressure was escalating. Alyssa's name had been released publicly, and local news stations had picked up the story. Her image, smiling in a Vanderbilt lab coat, was now on television, online, and in neighborhood flyers along the Greenway. The community demanded answers, but behind closed doors, investigators were playing a clock game with forensic evidence, digital trails, and the psychological patterns of a man who hadn't yet said a single word. By the morning of October 17, 2024, the investigation had crossed the threshold from suspicion to legally actionable evidence. The DNA found beneath Alyssa Lokits' fingernails matched the registered owner of the silver BMW observed on surveillance near the Greenway. Surveillance footage, cell tower triangulation, and vehicle forensics had aligned with disturbing precision. It was enough to justify the next move, an arrest warrant. Detectives submitted the probable cause affidavit to a Davidson County judge at 8:45 a.m. The affidavit cited the following: a DNA match between the suspect and the victim, surveillance footage placing the suspect's vehicle within 100 yards of the scene minutes before the time of death, trace blood evidence in the suspect's car interior, and a matching tread pattern from shoes found in the trunk. By 11 o'clock a.m., a signed arrest and search warrant was in hand. The operation was planned and executed by Metro Nashville Police's Violent Crimes Unit with assistance from the U.S. Marshals Task Force. At 1:22 p.m., officers approached the Brentwood residence. The suspect was located inside and taken into custody without incident. He declined to speak and requested legal counsel. No weapon was found during the initial sweep of the residence. The search team logged digital devices, 2 laptops, a burner-style phone, and a locked external hard drive. All were bagged and transferred to the Digital Forensics Unit for expedited analysis. In a closet off the main hallway, a duffel bag containing an unused prepaid SIM card, nitrile gloves, and a folded hoodie was recovered. Each item was cataloged. While the suspect was processed, Detective Reyes reviewed the interview strategy with the prosecution team. They agreed to proceed with limited engagement unless the suspect waived counsel, which he did not. The interview was terminated within 3 minutes. The arrest was made public later that evening. MNPD released a brief statement confirming the apprehension of a suspect in the murder of Alyssa Lokits. Her family was notified in advance. No name was released publicly at that time, pending formal charges. Meanwhile, the forensics team analyzed the hard drive seized during the residence search. Among the encrypted folders was a cache of location history logs and offline image files. A key discovery: GPS coordinates from the drive aligned with Alyssa's known running routes, including timestamps from dates weeks before the homicide. One folder labeled M Creek included screenshots from fitness apps that did not belong to the suspect. Investigators suspected he had either spoofed or screen captured public activity logs from social platforms connected to fitness tracking. That forensic lead introduced a new dimension. The case was no longer isolated to one day. There were indications of prior planning, possibly stalking. The Behavioral Analysis Unit reclassified the profile as premeditated targeting. Prosecutors were now preparing to add a charge of aggravated stalking to the case file, contingent on further digital validation. The question shifted from who to how long. From a procedural standpoint, the case was tight. Forensics had tied the suspect to the scene. Surveillance narrowed the timeline. Digital data showed location overlap and movement consistent with the sequence of events leading to Alyssa's death. But from a human standpoint, investigators faced a deeper question. How does a man with no criminal record, no visible motive, and no known connection to the victim end up executing a public killing with this level of control? That question had no immediate answer, but it reflected a pattern familiar to those in homicide divisions across the country. In some cases, motive isn't a financial or romantic thread. It's the internal logic of someone convinced they won't be caught. The lead prosecutor held a private press briefing with Reyes and the DA's digital crimes advisor. They agreed the next step was to pursue federal collaboration, particularly given the suspect's use of anonymized tools and offline tracking software. If interstate cyber activity could be proven, federal charges would follow. At that stage in the case, law enforcement had no confession, no eyewitness to the trigger pull, and no murder weapon. What they did have was a silent suspect, a dead woman, and enough hard data to hold one against the other in court. And still, the story wasn't over. Because behind every folder label and search history log, there's a chronology of choices. And in cases like this, it's not always the moment of the act that defines the crime. Sometimes it's the hours before, how the path was paved, not just how it ended. By October 18, 2024, the digital forensics team at MNPD had full access to the encrypted contents of the seized external hard drive. What they found wasn't just a set of files. It was a constructed system. A pattern of digital behavior that wasn't chaotic or random. It was archived, time-stamped, and organized by folder name and date. One folder labeled M Creek Logs contained GPS data pulled from multiple sources, device logs, cached maps, and screenshot captures from what appeared to be third-party fitness platforms. There was no sign the suspect had an account on those platforms himself. Instead, he had scraped public profiles, runners who shared their routes online. Alyssa Lokits was one of them. Investigators traced back the earliest activity to September 5, 2024, over a month before the murder. On that day, a screen-captured image of Alyssa's 1.8-mile loop around Mill Creek was saved in the same folder. Metadata confirmed the screenshot came from a desktop browser. That changed the tone of the case. This wasn't situational. This was pre-selection. There was now clear digital evidence that the suspect had studied her movements, not just once, but repeatedly over several weeks. The most recent file, dated October 13th, the day before the attack, was a notepad document with an entry that read, "Weather check, visibility, 6:15 p.m., cloud cover 28%. It was a line that offered no emotion, no confession, but spoke volumes to anyone familiar with the logistics of planning a confrontation in public. Another folder titled UTIL included modified versions of Google Earth KML files. Analysts determined that these had been edited to show entry and exit routes for the Greenway trail system. Some routes included notations like fence break, an unlit section, and blind curve. These were tactical notes, and they suggested the trail had been scouted more than once. It also raised concerns that Alyssa might not have been the only intended target at some point. The forensic team escalated their findings to the Behavioral Analysis Unit. Their report confirmed this suspect had engaged in digitally facilitated tracking behavior with a pre-criminal profile consistent with fixation, spatial rehearsal, and opportunistic isolation. At that point, the DA's office expanded the charge sheet. In addition to first-degree murder and felony firearm possession, the case now included felony stalking and unauthorized use of digital networks for target profiling. Meanwhile, Alyssa's family sat through a briefing on what this new evidence meant. It wasn't easy to hear that the man who killed their daughter had spent weeks following her without ever speaking to her, that he never needed to interact in person to create a threat. that this crime had begun, not on the trail, but in front of a computer screen. This is where true crime often intersects with modern digital reality. Victims don't have to know they're being followed to be in danger. Public settings aren't always protective, and the threat, in many cases, doesn't look like someone hiding in the bushes, but like someone scrolling at a desk. Detective Reyes added the new data points to the working timeline. Alyssa's death now had a prelude. It started not with the first shot, but with a screenshot, a seemingly small act that led to a fatal outcome. The final report from digital forensics ended with a line not often found in case files. Subject displayed adaptive use of open-source tools for non-consensual surveillance. Indicators point to functional intelligence and pre-attack rehearsal behavior. Translation: this wasn't a mistake. This was built. By October 20th, 2024, law enforcement had what looked like a complete investigative arc. A victim with no known connection to her killer, a timeline corroborated by biometric and GPS data, physical evidence recovered from a suspect's vehicle, and, most notably, weeks of pre-crime digital tracking. But the work wasn't finished. The shift had begun from field investigation to prosecutorial preparation. And in homicide cases involving stranger attacks, what holds in court is not just truth, but structure, sequence, and airtight logic. Prosecutors focused first on reinforcing the physical evidence chain. Each digital artifact pulled from the suspect's hard drive was linked to a specific creation time and IP log. Analysts produced a detailed timeline: file creation, access frequency, storage locations. Nothing was left to inference. It needed to be demonstrable. Screenshots weren't just visual. They were accompanied by device logs showing when, where, and how they were captured. The digital trail made the state's argument more than circumstantial. It was behavioral. It showed tracking, planning, and environmental mapping. It gave the act of murder context, intent. Simultaneously, forensic ballistics was revisited. While the murder weapon still had not been recovered, investigators were able to compare shell casings found at the scene to known models using ejection pattern and firing pin impressions. Results indicated the weapon was likely a compact 9mm semi-automatic, consistent with a Glock 43. No serial number tie-in yet, but enough to prepare a firearm presentation for court. Interviews with other Greenway Trail users were also conducted. Most had nothing new to add, except for one. A woman came forward after recognizing the suspect's photo in a redacted public release. She reported an incident from 3 weeks prior, a man standing motionless by the fence line near the unlit trail loop. She didn't file a complaint then, no interaction. No approach, but she remembered how uncomfortable it made her. Now the memory wasn't a coincidence, it was pattern behavior. While Reyes built the investigative summary for trial submission, a second layer emerged. What else might he have been planning? Data analysts combed through the suspect's offline archives. Several folders had been scrubbed days before his arrest, but metadata still recorded folder names like New Run and East Path Notes. There were route images from other cities, none linked directly to additional victims, but it raised concern. Was this an isolated case, or the only one that advanced far enough to be caught? The DA's team made a strategic decision not to pursue speculative charges. Their priority remained the Lokits case. Still, the digital evidence would be presented in full, unredacted, to show behavior, not just outcome. That's something that often doesn't reach the public, that a trial is less about telling the entire story and more about building what's provable. Not every file gets discussed. Not every motive gets explored. But here, the case was clean. It wasn't built on emotion. It was built on timestamps. By October 24th, an indictment was formally returned. Count 1, first-degree premeditated murder. Count 2, felony stalking. Count 3, possession of a firearm during commission of a dangerous felony. Count 4, use of digital infrastructure to facilitate a violent crime. Bail was denied. The suspect remained in custody at Davidson County Jail. He had yet to speak to investigators. His public defender issued a single statement: the case would be challenged in full at trial. Behind the legal briefings and forensic reviews, Alyssa's family continued their own quiet work. They had begun assembling documentation for a victim impact initiative, focused on digital surveillance and personal safety in public spaces. Their goal wasn't revenge, it was clarity, prevention. They'd lost their daughter not to a spontaneous act but to a system of behavior that grew unchecked until it didn't. What prosecutors were building now wasn't just a case, it was a message. That even silent crimes, ones that begin behind screens and unfold without warning, could still leave a forensic trail strong enough to carry the full weight of justice. The state of Tennessee veto redacted opened on February 24, 2025 in Davidson County Criminal Court. Jury selection had taken 4 days. The case had drawn media coverage from the beginning, but with limited leaks and a gag order in place, most of the evidence remained sealed. Prosecutors wanted it that way. They needed a clean courtroom, not a spectacle. Opening statements were clinical. The prosecution laid out its roadmap, established the timeline through digital forensics, linked the defendant to the scene with DNA and cell tower records, and proved premeditation through the recovered files. Their argument was structured, sequential, and grounded in documentation. There was no appeal to emotion, just weight. The defense strategy became clear early on. Discredit the timeline. They challenged the interpretation of digital data, suggesting the timestamps could have been altered. They implied the DNA transfer might have occurred through secondary contact without offering a credible scenario for how that would be possible between two people who had never met. But the evidence had already locked into place. First to testify were crime scene technicians. They described the recovery of shell casings, the GPS data from Alyssa Lokits' smartwatch, and the biometric readings that confirmed the moment her run ended. A digital analyst followed, walking the jury through the folder structures on the suspect's external hard drive. The prosecution displayed one file after another: trail maps, screen-captured fitness routes, browser history filtered by weather and daylight conditions. None of this was circumstantial when viewed in sequence. The digital trail wasn't hypothetical, it was forensic. Each action was preserved, each file logged in metadata, each log backed by access timestamps. A forensic biologist from TBI presented the lab results confirming the male DNA found under Alyssa's fingernails matched the defendant with a statistical certainty of 1 in 2.1 trillion. It was clear, unshakable data. The defense didn't attempt to refute it. Instead, they returned to their theory of indirect transfer, repeating it despite the absence of context or support. The next set of witnesses were civilian. A woman who ran on the Greenway 2 weeks before the murder testified about seeing a man standing near the unlit trail loop. She hadn't reported it at the time, but she remembered him. She remembered the stare. A second witness, a transit bus driver, testified to seeing the silver BMW parked in the same location during several afternoons in October, always around the same time. He couldn't identify the driver, but the consistency was noted. The defense attempted to cast these recollections as unreliable, but none were exaggerated. The details were simple, consistent, and supported by digital evidence already in play. The trial continued over 9 days. No witness changed course. No new information emerged that damaged the state's structure. The gun was still missing, but it no longer mattered. Prosecutors had already proven presence, intent, and execution. The defense rested after calling only one witness, a digital forensics consultant who conceded under cross-examination that the metadata in question showed no signs of tampering. Closing arguments returned to the beginning. Not the moment the trigger was pulled, but the moment someone chose to follow a stranger's running route online. A small digital act that escalated to real-world violence. Prosecutors reframed the case not just as a homicide, but as a warning that technology left unchecked can become a weapon in the wrong hands. The jury deliberated for just under 4 hours. The verdict, guilty on all counts. When read aloud, there was no reaction from the defendant, no visible response, no comment. He was remanded to custody without bond pending formal sentencing. Alyssa's family issued a short statement through their attorney. It was not a message of celebration. It was one of restraint, focused on the importance of privacy, public safety, and reform in how fitness data is shared and consumed. They were not asking for revenge. They were asking that no other family need to be in their position again. This is what accountability looks like when there is no confession, no apology, and no clear answer to why. It's not about closure. It's about establishing fact and making sure it holds. By the morning of June 20th, 2025, exactly 1 year and 3 weeks after Alyssa Lokits was gunned down on the Mill Creek Greenway, the sentencing hearing for Paul Kwang Ho Park convened in a packed Davidson County courtroom. The atmosphere was austere. Not one camera was permitted inside. The prosecution requested a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, citing overwhelming evidence, lack of remorse, and the calculated nature of the murder. There was no plea bargain, no last-minute negotiations. This was not a case of ambiguity. It was about closure. Judge Karen Whitlow, known for her direct approach, made it clear that this was not a crime of passion or impulse. In her own words, this was the execution of a woman jogging alone on a public trail. She was ambushed, targeted, and left to die by someone she knew and trusted once. The court sees no grounds for leniency. Park was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He remained silent throughout the proceeding, showed no outward emotion, and declined to offer any statement. No apology, no explanation. The Lokits family chose not to speak to press that day. Instead, they released a brief statement through their attorney, thanking the public for continued support and urging the community to hold each other close and look out for the quiet warning signs. That phrase, quiet warning signs, resonated far beyond Nashville. In the days following the sentencing, a makeshift memorial re-emerged at the trailhead of Mill Creek Greenway. Runners placed white flowers, laminated race bibs, and handwritten notes near a tree now marked with Alyssa's name and birth year. The city installed motion-sensitive emergency call boxes and committed to increasing surveillance and lighting in the area. But for many, that wasn't enough. The questions had grown heavier than the answers. How did a man like Paul Park slip under the radar? A self-employed coder with no previous criminal record, no restraining orders, no official history of mental illness, but upon closer review, investigators found a digital archive of obsessive behaviors. Geotagged photos of Alyssa taken without her knowledge, unposted drafts of messages she never saw, and private folders labeled with disturbing misogynistic titles. This wasn't just premeditated, it was cultivated. It raised broader concerns in Tennessee and beyond. What constitutes credible threat in the digital age? If someone's behavior is chilling but hasn't yet crossed into illegality, how do we intervene? In late July 2025, State Senator Colleen Brandt, DTN, introduced a bill nicknamed Alyssa's Law. The proposed legislation focused on digital stalking behaviors, seeking to modernize how law enforcement tracks pre-incident patterns. While existing Tennessee statutes criminalize harassment, they do little to address digitally sourced predation unless direct threats are made. And this law aimed to bridge that gap, particularly in domestic or past intimate contexts where silence often precedes violence. The bill included provisions for judicial review of behavioral tech patterns, i.e., GPS tracking, unauthorized access, pattern recognition in social media behaviors, early response interventions for suspected nonverbal digital stalking, expanded protective orders for women who report pattern-based paranoia, even if no overt threat is present. The bill passed initial committee hearings with bipartisan support. National advocacy groups like Women's Justice Project and End Tech Abuse Now rallied behind it, arguing that Alyssa's case was a wake-up call we can't afford to ignore. While policy caught up, lives remained altered. Alyssa's mother, once a quiet schoolteacher from Knoxville, became a reluctant advocate. In a rare interview with the Tennessean, she said, "I don't want to talk about Paul Park. I want to talk about how we failed to listen to women when they feel watched." She later added, "My daughter didn't live in fear. She ran freely. And now even that, the simplest joy, is something women question." Her words reflect a deeper fear now embedded in the minds of many women in Nashville and across the country. Not just fear of being followed, but of being unheard until it's too late. The story of Alyssa Lokits isn't just about a murder. It's about the silent cultivation of violence in a digital world where obsessions brew quietly and efficiently behind screens, where red flags aren't shouted but whispered through metadata, location trails, deleted text drafts, and obsessive pattern building that often escapes the law until it erupts. We often assume that justice ends with a verdict, but real justice must ripple outward into legislation, into prevention, into cultural change. Alyssa didn't know she was in danger. That truth alone is the most devastating and the most urgent. So here's a question worth carrying forward. How do we train ourselves, not just as individuals, but as a society, to notice danger before it takes form? That question won't resurrect Alyssa Lokits, but if asked earnestly, it might spare someone else. If there's one thing this case has taught me, it's that silence can be just as dangerous as noise. Alyssa didn't see it coming, because we still live in a world that downplays quiet threats. As someone who's walked you through this story, I hope it sparks not just outrage, but awareness. Let's ask the hard questions. Are we truly listening when someone says they feel watched, followed, unsafe? If this video resonated with you or made you reflect, leave a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from or what part hit home. And if it didn't connect, I'd still love to know why. Subscribe to the channel if you believe stories like this matter. Let's keep the conversation going.